Is the end goal here that abortion be illegal and it be criminalized and removed as a resource forever from this country? Is that the...
Illegal and unthinkable.
Illegal and unthinkable,
Yes.
so it is criminalized and stigmatized.
Jubilee released a Middle Grounds episode in November 2021. I just saw the video about a week ago and was surprised by the shallowness of the conversation. Many points were made, but most of them weren't fully articulated enough for the other side to hear out and acknowledge. Let's see how this conversation could have gone better.
If you agree, step forward. If you disagree, stay put. Nobody likes abortions.
I don't think anyone likes it. I think they use it, and they might use it incorrectly from my perspective, but I don't think anyone likes an abortion. Like, they're not like jumping for joy for it.
I think it is a very physically taxing process to go through, and I don't think anyone would want to intentionally have an abortion. I think those who get an abortion, most of the time, it's because they need to.
It's a harmful narrative.
It depends on what you mean by need to have an abortion. There are women who need it to save their own lives. Point made. But if the need stems from financial or social status, then that's not a need, but a simple convenience. It would be convenient if we could kill toddlers and teenagers for the same reasons the average mother goes to get an abortion. Is your 2-year-old putting a dent in your wallet? Take it behind the barn and shoot it. Problem solved.
It's a harmful narrative on both sides of the conversation to say that, women celebrate abortion. I think it creates a prejudice around women who do get abortions. And I don't think that it's good to kind of minimize the decision of abortion from either side, from either perspective. So.
Can the disagreeer step forward?
I think if you asked me this question maybe several years ago, I would have said nobody likes abortion. But I think in today's climate, it is much more celebrated. As a pro-life person, I've had people tell me that they will dedicate their next abortion to me. Instead of helping women, they will have an abortion.
I've heard very similar responses to you. Things like, I'll donate to Planned Parenthood in your name. And there's other pages like Shout Your Abortion that openly celebrates abortion rights.
On one hand, individuals celebrating abortion don't describe the majority of pro-choice supporters. These are isolated events, not full-scale waves. However, she's right in the fact that the trend of celebrating abortions is on the rise.
Celebrate abortion, and I think that campaigns like Shout Your Abortion aren't about getting in your face, but women who choose to have abortions suffer a lot of stigma and trauma from people who stand outside clinics and have grotesque images and literally, damning your soul.
Women are more likely to experience regret from having an abortion than from giving birth. Maybe all the so-called stigma is actually valid warnings to the psychological and biochemical trauma women would face after an abortion. And the grotesque images are showing the reality of abortion. If you don't approve of the images, then maybe you shouldn't approve the actions that the images are displaying, i.e., abortion.
Abortion as a medical procedure and resource is something that I do celebrate. It's a human right, and I love abortion.
There is no human right that allows you to steal a human right away from an innocent person. You can't steal the human right to life just because it is an inconvenience to you.
My name is Rocky. I use she, her pronouns. I'm from Austin, Texas, and I am very pro-abortion. I think that legislation like SB 8 opens the door and the path towards handing over our bodily autonomy to the state. I don't understand how anyone can justify using their personal beliefs to take away the rights of others.
Literally every law ever written was justified by someone's or some group's personal beliefs. Most of us have the personal belief that stealing is wrong. So we made a law that criminalizes theft. No one has ever written a law that they did not believe to be needed. Besides, there are many laws prohibiting bodily autonomy, such as not striking someone's body with your own, or not flashing your jiggly bits in front of children. You also can't use your body to murder others. You're not allowed to run on the highway naked. You're not allowed to serve people your bodily fluids as beverages. The list goes on and on. Bodily autonomy is reserved to you, yes, but not at the expense of the bodily autonomy of others. Human rights apply to all humans, not just you in particular.
My name's Abby. I'm from Orlando, Florida, and I'm an abolitionist of human abortion. We have to ask the question of what makes humans valuable. So because my worldview as a Christian gives me a foundation for human worth, and because I believe scientifically fetuses are human beings from the moment of conception, I am against abortion.
I don't think anyone who has ever read any medical book, regardless of reading level, would ever disagree that human beings begin at conception. The core argument that all pro-choice supporters fail to articulate is whether the preborn should be considered not as human beings, but as legal persons. No disrespect to Abby, but I don't think one needs religion to get a decent definition of a legal person.
Biological fathers should have an equal say in abortions.
Well, I think so. I mean, it's consistency. Like, if we're defining that as a life, if it is a life, to put a kid up for adoption, both parents have to agree.
I agree. I have talked to lots of women who've had abortions, and I've talked to lots of men who are hurting. They're completely heartbroken. They would have raised the baby. They wanted to raise the baby. They begged for the life of the baby, and they obviously created the baby together, but only one of them gets to decide if their child gets to live or die.
I would like to say, from more of a honestly feminist perspective, men have responsibility as the other parent of that child. Ironically enough, a lot of the times when pro-choice people put the focus completely on the woman, they strip the man of all his parental rights and responsibilities. And I think that's why actually a lot of men who are pro-choice because they don't want to have those fatherly responsibilities that they will have once the child is born.
Ayala made a really good point. Dave Chappelle also touched on this specific topic and said something around the lines of, if women should have the right to kill a child, men should have the right to at least abandon the child. It's a cold and brutal logic, but it's consistent. It makes sense. It takes two to tango. If a woman has the right to leave in the middle of a dance, a man should have that same right. That's a fine example of equality.
You left us, man. I want to know why.
There's a struggle.
I'm mad conflicted about this because I strongly feel like a man should not have control over what a woman does with her body. I more so have an issue with when a man doesn't actually want that baby. She wants it and then expects this man to like be the ultimate provider and child care and all this extra stuff, right? But in the case of if the man wanted it, the baby, and the woman didn't want it, he has no say so. I think that's a fucked up dynamic. So that's why I was going back and forth.
Asher was very close to understanding the situation. He knew the paradox about this abortion issue. If women have the right to leave, so should men. But if women don't have the right to leave, men shouldn't have the right to leave either. Either we both have the right to ditch or we don't. Equality, am I right?
Stay then. It sounds like you're for men having more rights.
I just can't force a woman to be like, no, you have to do this, because I think it's fucked up. It's her body.
But it's also a child's life in there. It's not just her body, it's a child's life.
And it's
in
also
But
your
still.
son or daughter.
I think truly, in my eyes, it's like it's my body. I get to do what I want with it, and I don't think anyone, including the other person who's involved, should have a say whether I want to keep it or whether I want to get an abortion.
Until another person's body is involved in the picture. If a man forces himself upon a woman, he should take responsibility for his actions. But take Mila's logic in this scenario. Imagine a man forcing himself on a woman and says no one should tell him to take responsibility for what he did with his body. You would laugh at him and say, "No, sir, your right to bodily autonomy ended when you involved the body of another person." Finding yourself in a tragic situation does not remove you from taking responsibility.
My name is Asher, currently reside in Las Vegas, and I'm for pro-abortion. I used to be against abortion until an unwanted pregnancy happened to me. If you know for a fact that you're not even gonna be the best parent for that child, or you can't provide for that child, or maybe you're just fearful and don't wanna pop a child out of you, or just whatever reason that you have, I feel like you shouldn't have to go through with that. You still have that choice over your life, your body.
Asher used to be pro-responsibility until he had to face responsibility. Think about it this way. There is a person who supports bank loans. They go get a loan and later realize they would have to pay it back, but they don't want to. It's hard. So what do? They burn down the bank. They stole money that they couldn't pay back and destroyed the institution that gave them the money. Isn't that such an inspirational story? No, it isn't. If you go get a loan, you take the responsibility of paying off your debt. Same reasoning applies here. If you make love in the dunes of the Cape, ready or not, you better take responsibility for doing the hokey pokey. Difficulty does not excuse anyone from taking responsibility.
I have had an abortion.
A few months ago, I found out that I was pregnant. When I imagined myself finding out I was pregnant for the first time, I wanted it to be celebrated. And in that moment, I felt such severe anxiety. And having that, I felt like the entire time I was just in a lot of emotional pain, grieving. I was debating about myself, about how I would be looked at or how I would view myself after getting the procedure done.
I ain't gonna lie, I'm nervous. So I'm gonna be real careful with my words. Clearly, as a man, I can't have an abortion. But my girlfriend, we've had 2 abortions. She didn't really want to have a baby. I didn't really want to have a baby. And I know for me, I don't want to be seen as that deadbeat father person, but I knew I wasn't really trying to sacrifice my own dreams or what I was trying to accomplish to be a dad at that point.
I think that's definitely like one of the biggest things to consider because I wasn't in any kind of position to be a mother, you know? So it's like, I want to get my shit together before I can have a baby and give it a life that it deserves. When I found out I was pregnant, the person that I was with at the time, they were like, I will support you in every way, but I will not be able to be there for you if you decide to keep it. And that definitely influenced my choice. It was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make. I like to think I'm a pretty generous, loving person, and the names that I've been called for even getting one, I've gotten evil, psychotic, demented.
Nazis believed that they were being generous and loving people when they were exterminating Jews. They were genuinely trying to rid the world of a symbolic cancer. They actually thought that what they were doing could be justified and morally righteous. Nazis were called evil, psychotic, and demented. I wonder why. Maybe it's because they were murdering innocent lives in the name of goodness and convenience. That may remain a mystery until the end of time.
My name is Christine. I'm from Denver, and I am on the anti-abortion side. So when I was 20 years old, I was a college student, and I found myself in an unplanned pregnancy, and I was pressured to abort very heavily, not only by my child's father, but by those around me. And I heard my son's heartbeat, and there was no debate. It was a life. His life was not mine to take. This is part of why I am very pro-life, because I know many women are pressured to abort when they don't want to.
Christine admitted the truth about the situation and accepted the circumstances. She pushed forward and made good out of a terrible situation. This is the right attitude and the best way to respond to tragic events and difficult conditions.
Can the disagreeer step forward?
Your story is absolutely powerful, and your story as well. I think something we probably all can agree on is abortion usually is a symptom of a bigger problem, whether it's finances, whether it's stability of housing, whether it's relationship issues. My perspective is that we address those issues instead of ending the life of a child.
I disagree. I don't think that abortion is a symptom. People should be able to access abortion when, how, wherever they want or need. I don't think that it's a problem to be fixed. I think that is still stigmatizing.
But I think the biggest thing is that there are birth control methods out there, and abortion should not be a birth control method. I think that's very critical. And to hear that, you weren't celebrated, I think life should be celebrated with everybody.
I'd like to call attention to that point too, just the fact of using abortion as birth control. I thank you for everyone sharing their stories so far. I didn't step forward, I haven't had an abortion myself, but I am a survivor of rape. I was on birth control at the time, and I still made the decision with my medical team that birth control is not 100% effective, and I wanted access to emergency contraceptive to take on top of that. And had that pregnancy or any of those methods failed, I would have chosen to have an abortion, and I'm very grateful that I had access to those resources, and I'm so mindful that there's so many women who don't.
Well, I think it gets down to the heart of the issue here. What is the unborn? Which scientifically the embryo is from conception, a living whole organism with distinct DNA. As a Christian, I come from a world.
Hold up. Did you catch that? A Wikipedia article about, let's see here, human personhood. Not human life, which has been proven to start at conception, rather personhood. Personhood is the condition in which the law recognizes a human being as a person. Sounds strange, a human being not being recognized as a person. Let me give you an example. Remember learning in school about a time in the United States when black slaves were counted as 3/5 of a person. The law did not recognize a slave as a full person, but 3/5 of one. Sounds awful, right? Well, if you were to ask a white slave owner what makes a person, they'd probably say something along the lines of, skin color, of course, duh. It's interesting how Jubilee didn't fight Abby's claim that the preborn are human beings. Rather, they wanted to make a point that the preborn are not recognized as legal persons. This is why I saw this entire conversation as shallow, because it deals with surface topics like parental responsibility, personal convenience, trauma from tragic events, but nowhere was the point of personhood articulated to conclusion. This conversation was like expecting an amazing comeback Star Wars film that hits all the right points and brings the entire fan base together in an epic moment of awesomeness. But no. Instead, we got a cheap early 2000s YouTube video parody mocking us right in the face. Look at that. It's only funny because it's cringe. That is the best word to describe this entire Jubilee video. Cringe.
Says that every human being has dignity and worth.
Not to disrespect any religion in general, but in my eyes, that's just pushing a belief onto someone rather than actually stating a real concrete fact.
That belief is based on a real concrete fact. Human beings begin at conception. Science literally proved that idea true. All human beings came from conception. It's a fact. You're actually disagreeing with the idea that all human beings have dignity and worth. If you deny that idea, regardless of its origin, you are anti-human. For someone who looks like their ancestors fought for their right to personhood, it seems strange that you would be eager to call certain humans unworthy of personhood for the sake of convenience. Interesting.
Scientifically, I'm pro-life because of science, not because of religion. But scientifically, I believe that life does start at conception. I don't think it makes sense to put life beginning at any other place during pregnancy. Doing so usually ends up saying that an already born person isn't alive, such as consciousness, heartbeat, etc. There are many pro-life people here from the science perspective who are not led by religious motives at all or partially. I am Ayala, I am 18 years old, I am from Charlotte, North Carolina, and I am anti-abortion. One misconception that I deal with pretty frequently is that we're all Christian, white, old men, and as a Jewish woman, younger, I really want more voices like mine to be seen in the anti-abortion movement because I think we have new perspectives that would help kind of bridge the gap and have us find a little bit of middle ground between our two opposing sides.
Abortion is murder.
I think it is murder. I think for the abortionist more so than the woman. I think a lot of women don't necessarily know exactly how an abortion procedure is formed. I've had a girl even tell me that at 20 weeks a baby is just a clump of cells, and that's just not true.
I do believe now there might be cases where some women might be unaware of what's going on in an abortion. But by and large, I think, especially with the advent of the internet and so much education out there, many of them do know that there's a life inside of them and they want to end that life, whether they call it murder or not.
Hard disagree. Absolutely disagree.
Okay.
I've definitely met a lot of teenage girls who grew up in our generation who believe that abortion is normal, a fetus is a clump of cells, and there is no human life in the womb. They don't tell you when you go in for an abortion consultation, this is a child and this is a human life, and that's what's going to be happening. I have a hard time believing that if most women knew they were killing a child, they would do that. I don't think women in America are that malevolent. I think it's very irresponsible and very hurtful to say, oh, this woman's a murderer because she had an abortion.
At least my personal experience, the people who worked there were very understanding. They let me know there is a child that could come out of you in 9 months. Are you sure you want to do this? And I knew there was a child in my body. I knew I could have a child in 9 months, and I knew that that child can grow old and be their own person. But I made that choice because I am allowed to have that choice. And especially you are a white man, and you are not allowed to say what I can do with my body, nor any of these other women who are able to carry a child.
I think that's so dangerous. I think that's so dangerous to say that you can't say because of your sexuality, who you are as a male or female, or how you believe as a religion, you can't define what's right and wrong. I think that's misguided, and we shouldn't take that into policy.
Wow. Imagine a slave owner saying that non-slave owners have no right to tell him how to handle his quote-unquote property. How rude of a person must you be to tell how a slave owner ought to treat his slaves, or rather tell him the slaves he owns should not be owned to begin with? The nerve of some people.
I think what she's
If it's a
saying is
child,
that
you should have
whatever
that right.
your morality is, I think that folks are entitled, that we have freedom of religion, we have freedom from religion. Whatever your moral value is, the issue is trying to turn that into legislation and putting it on someone else.
We legislate what's right and wrong all the time.
Many would argue that religion is the foundation of morals, that a lack of religion would cause an absence of justification for morals. Why should anyone be moral for the sake of morality? How would you begin to define morality? How would you stretch its borders and set its limits? Unless there happened to be an objective system of moral values, followed by judgment over the adherence of moral values, then anything would be permissible. Righteousness and evil would be relative.
I'm thinking even medically, like for Indigenous women, they're 2 times as likely to die from pregnancy-related complications. Who's responsible for that murder if she's forced to carry that baby?
Well, I would be all for working on legislation altogether where, if the woman's been taken advantage of, or if they've incest situations, or if her life's at risk, we can keep those options on the table.
Ayala's facial expression mimics my exact reaction. Conditions behind pregnancy do not determine human worth. If the mother's life was at risk, on the other hand, we must do everything to save the mother's life and the child's, if possible.
All of a a sudden, because she could potentially die, we'll make legislation where she can't abort that baby, and all of a sudden you're pro-abortion?
No, I'm not pro-abortion. I personally would not like her to choose that option. I think science
So
has
you'd
come.
prefer that she die, though,
No.
right?
I think science has come a long way where that's vastly not the case anymore within our medical community, and we need to continue to increase funding for those mechanisms to provide more research on how to keep the woman alive in those situations.
What is the end goal here, that abortion be illegal and it be criminalized and removed as a resource forever from this country? Is that the
Illegal and unthinkable.
illegal and unthinkable? So it is culturally.
Culturally, for women, we want women to have resources, first of all, to where they don't need an abortion, and then abortion for the abortionist is criminalized. So an abortionist could go to jail for performing it. Women should not be criminalized, because at the end of the day, women are victims of abortion as well.
Ayala is on fire.
Figuratively speaking.
Pregnant mothers should not be criminalized for abortion. Rather, it is the abortionists who perform abortions out of convenience who should be criminalized. Just like drugs, drug addicts shouldn't be criminalized. Drug dealers should be. Pharmacists don't count. There is a difference between drugs that save lives and drugs that take lives. Those that offer the latter should be charged for murder.
Abortion should be accessible to rape and incest survivors.
If you're pregnant from your brother or your cousin or your father, especially if it wasn't consensual, or even if it was, you should still have that option to abort the baby. And especially if you've been raped, there are some people who have that thought like, oh my God, like what if when I look at my child, I relive that trauma?
Just a reminder.
And not saying that's how all rape victims view it, but it's just like some women have that fear.
Imagine being so afraid of your mother because your dad was a jerk. Imagine being disgusted by your sister because your brother was abusive. Imagine hating your own child because they were forced on you. You shouldn't kill your parent, sibling, or child because someone else made you feel terrible. If you hate the innocent for the crimes of the guilty, you need a reality check and therapy.
Okay, so I was raped for 4 years of my life, violently, more times than I can count. And I did get pregnant when I was 15. My rapist threatened me with abortion multiple times. Used that as a tool to keep me in his power. If he had the power to terminate evidence, he had power against me. I did end up losing her, but I wanted her very badly. I named her Rahel, which is Rachel in English. And I think it's very important to humanize people who are conceived in rape because they're walking around right now.
There's a lot of them.
There's a lot of them, and I think it's very insulting to place that on a human being. I think that humans, no matter how they are conceived, are human beings, and they deserve to be respected, and their lives deserve to be respected.
And I agree, because that's me. I agree 100%. And my mom has always told me she doesn't view me as even on my birth certificate, he's not my father. So.
Also, I want to tap on what you said, though, because you said you really wanted to keep your daughter. And although you don't, see it as the rape baby and stuff, other people who also go through that traumatic experience may actually see it like that, right? You wanted that, but there's other people that had their a choice taken away from them. They shouldn't be shamed at going through this, and even having to live through that experience of the rape baby.
Here's the thing. When you get an abortion as a reaction to rape, you are continuing the cycle of violence. So you were raped, that was a violent experience that happened to you, that wasn't your fault, you're hurt, you've been victimized. Why is it fair to further victimize someone else because you are hurt?
But you're seeing it as a someone, though, man.
Ayala made the right point on the cycle of violence continuing. Notice how Asher hinted the root of the entire dilemma of this struggle between pro-life and pro-choice. He said to Ayala, but you are seeing it as a someone. When you get rid of all the surface level fluff, this is the fundamental issue that is to be addressed. What would you, Asher, say if a slavery abolitionist told a slave owner that owning someone is wrong? To which the slave owner responds, but you are seeing it as someone. The slave owner doesn't see slaves as persons, but the abolitionist does. That is what it's like to be pro-life. Telling already born humans that pre-born humans are persons, only to be met with, but you are seeing it as a person.
putting myself in a woman's shoes or a human being's shoes, right? You take my choice away. You rape me. And for all you know, I might be a struggling human being, right? Making $8 an hour or something like that. Crazy bills. I might be living in my car. I might be sleeping under the dumpster behind McDonald's. But now because of your opinion, right, and my traumatic experience, I get shamed because I don't want to bring this life into the world, bro. Oh, but you should give birth and then put it in foster care if you don't want it, bro.
I want to touch on that too, just for a second. Like for trauma, I think absolutely what I am passionate about is giving people the choice. And for you, you thought a lot about your choice and you wanted that pregnancy. And I'm really sorry that you lost that child. And I also thought a lot about for myself when I went through that experience, what choice would be best for me. And for me, that was not carrying the child. And I think trauma is such an interesting thing. For me, not having control over a child growing inside of me and changing my fate of my life, you know, that would be more traumatic than the initial experience. We don't know how people are going to react, but I do fight and would want them to have the choice to do what's best for them. I think a strange misconception that people have about people who are pro-abortion is that we don't have respect for life or we don't care about children. That's absolutely not true. I respect life very much. Unfortunately, I've also seen a lot of negative aspects of our systems in the US, like the foster care system. It's out of that respect that I believe people should have the right to choose an abortion.
The fact that you're okay with killing the lives of innocent human children shows you do not respect life or children. And to use the foster care system as an excuse to kill more human lives is stupid. That's the same reasoning dictators used to justify genocide of hundreds of millions of lives. Take China, for example. The Chinese dictatorship slaughtered millions of Chinese people because there was quote-unquote not enough food to go around. And those same dictators will say that they respect life and children just like you.
America offers resources to help you raise a child.
There's tax benefits to having children. I think there was also, in the latest round of COVID money, there was funding for women who've had children.
Yeah, and there are so many Christian charities and so many different organizations that want to help women, and the resources are there.
Also, government resources. There are government resources that help you take care of children. Are there enough? That is a different question.
I was basically just agreeing with what you said, because Section 8, food stamps, free health care, school programs and whatnot. Like, there are resources. Are there enough?
That's how my mom survived when she had me, because of government assistance. So that's the only way she made it, because of that.
I have been a pregnant teenager, and I've also been a teenage mother on welfare and unemployed. The number of resources that are available state to state is something that is atrocious. But what it comes down to is a lot of time and energy. The choice between, do I go to work and get the money to pay rent, or do I go and I sit in the office, or do I go to this nonprofit who's requiring me to fill out this application and come to a meeting in the daytime when I'm supposed to be working.
So you see it kind of like a job, like you're clocking in to fill in paperwork and you're receiving your check.
It is. Low resources and creating these sort of impossible hurdles and more barriers for people who are already experiencing them to overcome to get the help is not a help at all.
The question of sufficient resources does not make any valid strides in support of abortion. Remember the Chinese government example.
And I feel like a completely separate conversation is, it is extremely hard to be a single mother who is also a woman or person of color and to get resources. Especially Black women, they are notoriously, even in that room where they're giving birth, they aren't taken seriously.
Well, I just want to say one thing, because I think it's important. So I might not look it, but I'm Native American, have my Cherokee card and everything. We have universal health care in the Indian community. And when she went to have me as a child, they told her in that universal health care system that she's not allowed to have pain medicine because that's a luxury. So she got it through government assistance. So that's a big deal that the United States more for the Native American community.
That is
I'm glad we're
such a low
discussing
bar.
No, I'm not saying that's acceptable. I'm not saying that's acceptable, but I'm saying like
It exists.
it exists. That story exists.
But there are literal reservations out there that do not have water, do not have electricity, do not have internet. That is in 2021. Are those not resources to raise a child?
Oh my stars. It's like the people in those reservations are living in conditions like those before the industrial age. However did those people raise children in such conditions? It's not like we have over thousands of years of history in which people gave birth and raised children in those very same circumstances, if not worse. Birthing babies in the middle of the woods, raising children in the mountains, foraging for food in unexplored territories, all the while surrounded by vicious predators, and always searching for shelter before the weather changes drastically. And yet, we're all still here. The only difference between us and our ancestors is that we have become soft, weak, and dumb.
Let's
Why
address
is the
that
government
instead of killing the
that
baby.
To say that
That's
the
right.
government, the
Let's
question
address
was,
that.
does
That's
the
what I'm
government
saying.
provide resources? No. Does America provide resources? No. That's unacceptable.
You liar!
There are tons of resources. More than 3,000 pro-life pregnancy centers are found nationwide in the United States. Most provide the necessities for free, while others provide at a reduced cost. Many other resources and programs are provided for in many other venues and sectors.
Abortions will continue to happen regardless of the law.
All right, well.
That ain't never gonna change.
I think, of course, they'll continue to happen. A law doesn't mean that something is not going to happen at all anymore, just like rape, just like murder, just like anything else we've outlawed. Just because they're still going to happen doesn't make it right.
But if you criminalize doctors and abortion providers, right, that means we no longer have providers. That means abortion is no longer an option. And that by default, the way that this country, and especially my state, legislates will mean, and it has happened, we have precedent, a woman who tries to self-induce or who tries other non-medical methods to have an abortion can and has been criminalized. What is the policy that doesn't just absolutely take away the right that people have to access an abortion, regardless of what their
Control their own body.
beliefs are?
If that child is a human being deserving of the right to life, then yes, it should be criminalized, just like murder of 2-year-olds and 5-year-olds, and adults is criminalized, right?
But that's so different though. You got people
different?
you have people that's 2 years old, already out the womb. They've been here for years, right? And then you got these cells.
Can I ask you something?
Go ahead.
When does it stop being a clump of cells?
Personally, I'm not worried about the clump of cells.
Decades of medical research
don't
has not
understand
been
why
able
we're
to
ignoring the
land on
question.
that
And
answer.
I'm trying to answer your question. As far
So
as
do
the
you
cells,
believe that abortion should be allowed all 9 months of pregnancy?
I do feel that's a bit more extreme. So I will agree on that aspect.
But why is it more extreme?
Wait, but let's not
Exactly,
act like women are just deciding to get abortions at like during their second or third trimester. And the women who are doing it, it's either that they're going to die giving birth or it's under some medical circumstances, because I doubt, even myself, I doubt that I would get to a 6-month, 7-month mark and then decide, oh, actually, I don't want to make this commitment. I feel like there's a lot of this conversation, like when does it become wrong? When it's- but like as if we're actually going to get an abortion at that time.
Jubilee did not show this panel coming to a conclusion on this question. Pro-abortion supporters never seem to give a direct answer. They say things like, no one is going to want to abort at 9 months into pregnancy. Not true. Even though it is rare, it is something that is sought out. Abortion at 9 months. Take New York City, for example. Most pro-choice supporters would be against that, but why? This is an important matter to figure out. At what point in the development of human life from the moment of conception to the moment of birth is personhood granted? 1 month? 3 months? 5 months? 9 months? The answer from pro-choicers comes in 2 variations. I don't know, or I don't care. Then why not kill infants or toddlers or teenagers out of the same logic? I don't know, I don't care. These are dangerous words because you'd be playing with the lives of tens of millions of innocent lives. Think of a tyrant asked whether the lives of the nation's low-class citizens matter. The tyrant may respond with, "I don't know," or "I don't care." Wrong. You should know and you should care, because you were one of them. You didn't come from an infant, you were an infant. You did not come from a fetus, you were a fetus. You were an embryo, you were a zygote. Your entire physical anatomy and biochemistry was evident since conception.
A lot of the what pro-life people would consider hostile pro-choice comments and things like that are a response to hostile pro-life people. And I think that doesn't get talked about on our side because we don't like to fight each other. But I think it's an important point because I've seen absolutely disgraceful comments made towards women who are going into clinics, who are obviously in a very traumatizing situation, and you don't know what that woman is going through, and they're shouting obscenities at her. And that's appalling. And I think that we need to take responsibility as pro-life people to understand they've experienced so much hurt from our side of the community.
And I agree with that, I think, but from our side of the aisle, folks are very passionate because they believe that's a life, they believe that's a baby, and they want to do everything they can to save that child. But I agree that our rhetoric needs to be there as a resource and another option, and we can do that peacefully and respectfully as well.
I think on any side of any controversial issue, you're always going to have those extremists. Same thing on the pro-abortion side. People are always going to have feelings, and people are always going to fight on that level, right? But I think it's about coming up here and saying, like, what actually makes common sense, and how do we come up with policy that doesn't force folks to live by other people's values.
Ayala started this perfectly. Sebastian added clarification, but Rocky ruined it all by saying we should come up with policy that does not force people to live by other people's values. All policies are made up by personal values. And to top it all off by saying we need to throw off our extreme opinions and realize what is common sense. The pro-abortion side dodged and ignored all of the questions that the pro-life side threw at them, such as when living humans were considered living humans, and when personhood should be granted to persons. The pro-life side clarified many misconceptions and strawman arguments that the pro-abortion side had. This was a very unproductive and one-sided discussion. On the bright side, it was all civil, courteous, and many can learn from this experience that at the end of the day, we can all agree to disagree.